We're now joined from London by Ellie Green from the right of centre think tank Policy Exchange, and here in the studio is Edinburgh University's Dr Sarah Kayambe, who's an expert on immigration policy, and Dr Donald McCaskill, the Chief Executive of Scottish Care. Ellie Green, to you first. You support this. Do you think it's going to work?
I think it's definitely a welcome step and something that, as you've explained, has basically fulfilled what the UK government that was democratically elected, that they promised to do in their manifesto pledge, that they would introduce this points-based system that would seek to control immigration. I think that obviously the government has sensibly said that they will be assessing this system as it's rolled out, and they will need to, as this is a major shift in immigration policy. However, I do think it will force businesses to step up to the challenge and to try and make them really think in investing and training and ultimately, hopefully, paying workers more, which I think should be a welcome step and is no bad thing.
Dr Kayambe, do you agree with that? Do you think this is a fair system?
I'm not sure that it can be called fair. I think it's revealing that this that the government is currently basing this on its electoral mandate or on the 2016 referendum, rather than on what's good for the country economically. In fact, some of the recommendations from the MAC itself has acknowledged that there are drawbacks to pursuing this course of action. And some of those drawbacks are particularly pertinent in Scotland, such as that it will result in population decline across the UK, and it will result in an increase in dependency ratios. I think there's a lot.
What does that mean?
That means that there'll be more people, that the working age population will need to support more people who are either old or young, who are therefore not in work and will require support. And particularly in Scotland, that population dimension to this debate is really crucial in a way that's not registering at the UK level. And I think that's deeply concerning. I think there's quite a long way to go yet. This is the first step of a series of proposals, and there's not really enough detail to be able to assess what's fair and what isn't. Certainly, the level of restriction at the lower skilled end is dismaying because it's based on a productivity calculation that doesn't bear in mind that some industries that pay lower wages are nevertheless crucial for the economy in the UK and particularly in Scotland.
Donald McCaskill, what will this mean for the care sector in Scotland?
These proposals will be immensely damaging. That shouldn't come as surprise or news to the Westminster administration. Every care body in the United Kingdom warned this government that to introduce these measures risked the whole sustainability of the social care sector. Simply using narrative like it's up to business to come up to the plate is naive and ill-founded, especially from a government which has yet to declare its social care policy. The majority of social care provision, the care of particularly older individuals, is paid for by the state. The reason that social care workers who are highly skilled, and I agree with the Minister, it is deeply offensive, and today it has been deeply offensive to the 200,000 plus Scottish workers who work in social care, to have politicians popping up on television describing their work as being low skilled and of no significance. It's deeply offensive, and we have got to get an immigration system which is about bringing the brightest and the best, and that includes the emotionally bright and the emotionally best.
How many of those 200,000 care workers in Scotland come from abroad?
The total data in Scotland suggests that between 6 and 8% of individuals come from out with Scotland. But in some areas, particularly in my sector, in the care home sector, that can go up to, in some of our remote parts of Scotland, to around about 30%. So the very fragility and survival of care around Scotland is put at risk by what I described earlier today as a policy which is not based on reality.
And how many of them do you think would have qualified under this points system? None of them at all?
Because the average...
Thousands of gaps in the care sector then?
Thousands of gaps. We have thousands of gaps at the moment. In the United Kingdom, it's over 120,000 vacancies. The average pay, and in Scotland we pay the living wage, unlike the rest of the United Kingdom, but even here we could not have a worker who would meet these criteria. We've warned the Westminster government that if they introduce these measures, if they do not listen to care workers, to families, to carers and to producers and providers, then we risk the sustainability of the health service and the social care system. But they're not listening.
Ellie Green, nobody's listening to the experts who are actually involved in delivering these services, and this puts them at risk, they're saying.
Yes, and certainly I think in terms of social care reform, that's absolutely necessary and something that Policy Exchange itself has pushed for. And we have researchers that have looked into the significant failings of the current social care system.
But this is going to happen over the course of the next year, and no reform is going to be done in that sense of timing. So this is going to cause huge gaps.
There is hope for that. There is hope for that. And I think that what we need to see is there's been a lot of quite alarmist rhetoric when it's come to this new points-based system, although we always knew that it was coming to some extent. But exactly what it would look like is only now just being fleshed out. And remember, it's only just been announced today, so we've still got a lot to learn about how exactly it's going to work. But I would say that, you know, this policy is not designed to, it's designed to encourage highly skilled workers and to make sure that people are able to contribute to the British economy, and that people are also being listened to when they say that they believe that there has been some serious issues when it comes to immigration. I think that it's important to recognise that people have long been frustrated with the immigration policy of this country. And this is the first time that the UK government has really been able to take control, and following Brexit has been able to really carve out how they would like to see the immigration policy of the UK.
But you don't have to be earning £25,600 a year to be a skilled worker, as Donald McCaskill has just told us.
That's absolutely true. Of course that's the case. And there are those who are extremely highly skilled, but unfortunately in quite low paying jobs. However, we need to think of steps of how it's going to be possible to basically control immigration in some way, and points-based systems have a real possibility of hopefully delivering on the promises of trying to control immigration that had previously caused so many problems. I think it's also quite an important point that this is not there's been some sort of discussion around as if it's a very emotional problem, that it's going to cause issues for refugees or asylum seekers or those that have been persecuted, and it's important to make a very distinct definition between the two.
Sarah Canby.
Well, I think one of the problems or concerns here is that we know that concerns about immigration don't really relate to immigration numbers as such. So generally in attitudinal data on immigration, where immigration numbers sit doesn't really seem to affect where concerns are. Numbers tend to affect more the salience of immigration as a political issue, which is a rather different thing. And so I think what I'm concerned about here is not so much the move towards selectivity. I think that's something that you see across a lot of OECD countries. But what is concerning is that in those countries, while there's a move to selection, while people look to attract the brightest and the best, and there's surely a part of migration that is about, you know, the competition for global talent, in a lot of those markets, you have got access to other workers, either in the EU, but also in the States and Canada. There is always a pool, either through large temporary worker programs or large seasonal worker programs, but we don't see that in this. So, I mean, unless the provisions under the Youth Mobility Scheme are going to be an awful lot more generous than what I'm expecting, it's very difficult to see how this big rebalancing is going to take place within the time frame or at all, and it's very worrying what the impacts will be of that on businesses, particularly in Scotland.
Will this have any impact, Donald, on increasing wages in your sector, for example, given that there's a shortage of staff? You're going to have to try harder to attract people. And does that mean that you could drive up the costs?
I think you need to ask that question of politicians, because most care is paid for by the public purse. And the public purse, particularly in these times of austerity, is very tight. But if I think of what's happened in Scotland for my members in the last 20 or 30 years, they have been able to utilise the talents of women and men from Europe and from elsewhere who have come to Scotland to create in our country places and communities of compassion and care. From next January, which is only 10 months away, we are going to have a door closing on that opportunity, and that's not a prospect which we want.
Thank you all for joining us on Scotland Tonight.